So I went down a rabbit hole this morning
Oh
with
yeah.
the Russell brand. I watched the Daily Motion video,
Mm.
and then it gave me a bunch of different. Oh, maybe you want to watch what Sharon Stone or Sharon Osbourne said about Russell Brand. Maybe you want to watch what his former girlfriend said. And here's a time he was wildly inappropriate. So I'm
Wow.
full of Russell Brand nonsense floating through my head this morning.
And he does feel like a bit of a nonsense clown, doesn't he?
It's like one of the one of the interviewers had said to him that you look really cool when you're on stage, but in person you look preposterous, and it's that,
Yeah. Do you
and
hear
it's totally true.
Bob Geldof quite a few years ago at an award ceremony called him a cunt on stage?
So they did bring that up in the Daily Motion piece, but also there was another like 2 or 3 minute video clip of Sharon Osbourne talking about Russell Brand, and she brought it up again because apparently he had said something.
Mm.
He was accepting an award or presenting an award, something, and he had said, "Oh, Rod Stewart had a go at me for being a womanizer, but like I had a go at his daughter." So he did something similar with Bob Geld or Sir Bob Geldof, and that's where
Mm.
Sharon Stone was like, "You don't say shit about people's daughters like that, especially in front of their fathers."
Yeah, exactly. And when you say the Daily Motion thing, you're talking about the Channel 4 Dispatches documentary.
Yes. So for anybody we'll put a link to it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but
Mm.
it's an hour and 15 minutes of, it starts with the allegations and
Mm.
interview with the women or actresses who are
Mm.
representing the women, their words, but not their faces.
Mm.
And then a bit of a history of Russell Brand before it ends with who
Mm.
he is now and where he is, what he's doing now.
As in, hasn't changed one bit.
Well, he's changed his addictions are now more wellness
Mm.
health guru related than they had previously been. But maybe we should take a step back. I've just jumped into it because I just finished watching it like a minute and a half ago.
Yeah. Well, the kind of changes in his life are kind of normal for an addict anyway, that was addicted in the way that he was addicted. And with his other mental health problems, like this isn't diagnosis because I'm not a therapist or even his clinician. It's just that he has a very extroverted personality that is constantly seeking input from the things he's addicted to. And he's very low inhibitions and highly inappropriate. But people like him calm down once they get into their 40s. And then they just start to tone their addictions down a bit. Like they sleep with less people, they get into less trouble. And it's just part of the aging process, it seems, for people who present like he does.
It
And
gets tiring after a while, I imagine.
yeah, yeah.
Just watching him sometimes is exhausting because he's got a
Yeah.
manic personality that I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine being that personality.
No, Jesus Christ. And I don't know, I don't know if you had time to watch every single bit in the documentary, but there was some stuff where like this woman who was like his PA for a bit, to get his attention, she would shout his name and show a picture of his own face.
I did watch the whole thing, and she was like, he even commented that you get me. So he
Yeah.
knows he knows what he's like. He knew
Yeah. No, they
who he
usually
was
do.
as a person.
Mm.
What I found interesting was, I still find it interesting that people are, I mean, I guess not everybody has watched the documentary, but
Mm.
that people are still defending his character when it's, even if you didn't watch the documentary, but you've been a fan of his for a long enough time, you could
Mm.
see glimmers of
Yeah.
his behavior and things that he says. Like in the documentary, there was a video, or no, not in the documentary. One of the clips I watched afterwards was a guest on his show in 2006. Her name is escaping me. She got on the show and Russell immediately said, "Can I have it off with you or your 2 daughters?" And then went on a couple minutes of, "Well, you've got two daughters. You're not even going to give me one. I don't understand." So that type of humor doesn't come from a place that isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It,
I'm trying to, it's funny because as I was saying that, I was like, well, Anthony Jeselnik does that type of dark humor, but it's not, then I've corrected myself because it's not that type of,
he does, and also
I'm going
Anthony
to shag your
Jeselnik.
daughters.
Yeah.
He's not I'm going to sleep with your daughters humor.
No, he's dark, but it comes from a different place, and the delivery is entirely different, and
Yeah.
his motivations are likely to be different, and where he goes with it is very different, because Russell Brand will often act on what he's saying, whereas other
And
comedians don't.
what kind of struck me was when two of his alleged victims had commented that the change in his eyes, like his eyes just kind of glazed. One said his eyes glazed over, and another said his eyes just went black, like it was a different person who entered into him. And it's like, I wonder, you as the academic psychologist can probably speak to this better, but I wonder if it's still that force of addiction. Like he's come back out and said that he was promiscuous and everything was consensual, but would he be able to fully assess consent if it was his addiction that was fueling that behavior? Because it's not like, a heroin addict doesn't plan to, suck dicks in a park for $5. It happens because their addiction fuels them. So could his addiction have tricked him into thinking, oh, this is okay?
There's a few different things there. That was a bit of a shotgun question. First of all, let's just talk about the eyes thing. This is one of those things that come up in eyewitness testimonies that you're not really sure if that's actually happened or not. I'm not talking about the allegations as a whole. I'm just focusing literally on the eyes thing. It is something that does get warped in people's memories, because eyewitness testimony is notoriously awful. Like you can imagine shattered glass when there wasn't. You can be fabricated a gun when there was no gun, and all these other things. You can change somebody's clothes or attire completely. Through basically either the way that you've been asked the question could change your memory, or it could just be the time and the distance. And the allegations that these women were making were so scary and horrific. And then again, look, for purpose of this, we'll assume they're true, okay? I know there's lots of naysayers and it's, but they're making it up and shit. No, we're assuming it's true, that this has happened. That means they've been through a really horrific incident. So what his eyes are doing isn't really relevant to what happened, but it does kind of speak more probably to their state of mind and what they went through. And it's kind of affected the way that they remember what his eyes were doing. Because it is a fairly typical thing that would come up from a victim.
Could it almost be a coping mechanism in the person who is providing that evidence? Because then you've taken what someone who was someone you trusted and a rational person, and by changing their eyes, you kind of change them into a monster versus, right? And that's how you've perceived them in that moment is they're not that person that I know. So that's a physical change that they manifest.
So their eyes like end up looking like quite soulless and all that stuff. The glazing over thing, that is quite common in somebody that has like that. Obviously I can't speak about him specifically, but if he's focused on trying to do something, like he talks about his obstacle course, right? So he's trying to figure out the algorithm to break down a woman's security barriers. And so the whole glazing over thing would say to me that he's not really present thinking about you as a human. He's in his head thinking, well, how do I get her to say yes? She's saying no. What can I say and do right now? So his whole eyes glazing over thing just means he's going to his internal world to try and break you down.
It's interesting you talk about how questions are asked. It reminded me of a study that I had read about where they showed people a car accident.
Yes.
And the car accident was two cars traveling at not an aggressive speed, hitting each other, but that when they asked people how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, because they used the word smash, they were like, oh, they must have been going really fast, and they gave whatever number that would be. And when they said how fast were they going or what speed were they traveling when they hit each other, the speed was reduced. If they asked about broken glass, they would say yes, there was broken glass when there wasn't any, but if they'd asked them to define the scene, they wouldn't have talked about the glass. So that's an interesting point. And I just wanted to share this study because I know some people, when you like, there's someone in my life that when I talk about how memory is skewed and it's based on how you saw that moment, but not how it actually was, they get very defensive because they're like, no, my memory is infallible. But it has been proven. It's been proven it can be very easily swayed.
Massively. I mean, I've gone back to things that I read a book or watched a TV show and I know something happened. I was sure about it. And I can't even remember what it was now. There was something recently. Me and my partner were talking about a show. And then I was like, no, didn't X, Y, and Z happen? And then she was like, nah, no, that didn't happen. And then we went back and watched it. And I was like, oh, fuck's sake, she's right again.
Again.
Yeah.
Maybe you should start trusting her then.
Yeah. After 9 years together, I do listen to her a lot more than I used to. But yeah, so that's the eyes glazing over thing. Witness testimony is bad. But the other thing is that people try to say, well, that means we can doubt the whole of the woman's testimony. It's kind of like, well, women tend to know if they've been raped or sexually assaulted. That's not what we mean by eyewitness testimony can be incorrect. It's like the details will be wrong. But some
And
have
I think
known.
a lot of people question the validity of these allegations because of the time that it took for these women to come forward. But one of them made a very good point that he was a superstar and she
Yeah.
was an audience member. Who was going to believe her? She was going to be. It's not like it would have been a quiet rape trial that would have made a local newspaper. It would have been international. And that on top of then having to relive the abuse in front of police officers and a court, now you're reliving that abuse in front of everywhere you turn, you're going to see newspapers and shows with your head on it. That's a big mindfuck to somebody who's already been assaulted.
The reason why people come forward in the way that they have, I mean, I don't agree with trial by media as a thing, but until we change the system.
But it is a thing.
Yeah, until we change the system, it's not going to stop, because it's the only way that women can get their stories heard at the moment and actually get people to empathize with their cause. So I think it's better than the alternative. I wish it didn't happen, and I wish things happened appropriately, but you don't have any other choice if no one's listening to you.
Absolutely agree. And I think that speaks to why these women hadn't come forward, is because they knew they were going to be going through trial by media. And we already are harsh enough with women who have been assaulted. Yeah. But now do these women, who they're women now, some of them were children at the time. Like that 16-year-old was barely a teenager. Does she really need to go through the rest of her life being the one that Russell Brand assaulted, or you were asking for? Why would you go back to his room? Why? All of those questions would lead somebody to just,
or like the biggest one to show how ignorant these blokes are is, oh well, he can shag any woman he wants. They were throwing themselves at him. Why would you have to rape someone? You don't understand
because
them,
but also because he's in the mindset that he could shag any woman he wants. Yeah. He's thinking, how could you possibly say no to me?
Yeah. And then he doesn't see coerced consent as rape or sexual assault. Like, to him, if he gets a coerced consent to do the act, to him that's fine. Oh,
that's a win, because he talked her into it.
Yeah. And that's kind of what happened with the 16-year-old Alice. A lot of that stuff going on there, like where he assaulted her within the relationship and stuff. And because she was so young, she didn't have the experience to say, well, we might be together, but this is still sexual assault. You know, and in fact, actually, it could be rape because it was forced oral sex, and that's still rape in the UK.
And she was 16 at the time. What is the age of consent in the UK?
16. So this is one of the problems, is that people say like, oh, well, it's legal, so there's no problem. It's like, you can still rape somebody if you're going out with them, for one thing. The second thing is, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's morally right. And the entirety of my life, it has been inappropriate for a 16-year-old to be with a 30-plus-year-old.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
The reason why our age of consent is 16, it's because teenagers, you can't stop them fucking each other. So you don't want them to go to prison because they were being teenagers. It's to protect teenagers from the judicial system. It's not so that creepy old Rusk and Jimmy and Rolf could go off hunting the 16-year-olds.
Not just them. Now it's a whole other breed of just regular blokes who want to get their 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
I also was super disturbed by the account of when I think it was with Alice, the 16-year-old, where she woke up and he was over her, drooling into her mouth and then forcing her to swallow his saliva. Like, that's not even that's just a humiliation power move.
I wonder what she'll do if I do this, sort of thought.
He's not seeing any of the women he's assaulting as people. It's just objects that are there for his pleasure. And then when he's done, they'll drive her to the tube station and drop her off.
Yeah. And this is why I think, like, part of his thing about, well, I've been honest about my promiscuous lifestyle and all that stuff. First of all, there's one issue there, is that the level of his promiscuity wasn't just that he was shagging around. He was shagging 5 women a day.
Yes.
Like that really is an addiction, and that's excessive. And there's no way that all of those women were having a good time and they weren't having the time that they consented to having.
And I don't think that's a valid, he's used that in some of his videos to excuse his behavior, but that's not a valid
No.
anything. Like, it's not a valid reason. It's not a valid excuse. Yes, you were promiscuous, but that doesn't mean everyone said yes.
And he's trying to twist it into like, well, they're using my past against me. Look at me being a victim, when it's not like that at all. It's like, if
It's
you're
also why in a couple of videos they've shown his ex-girlfriends who were making comments about him, saying he always treated me really well. He never had, I was never coerced. We always had a good time. It's like, well, yeah, just like a serial killer doesn't kill every single person they meet. A serial rapist isn't going to be raping every single woman they come in contact with, or every single person they come in contact with. You may have had a good experience with that person. Lucky you. Ted Bundy used to work in a suicide hotline and helped people. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and like even that Masterson bloke, whatever his name is, got positive character references in his trial. So like, I mean,
I'm not sorry. I just need to go back and say I'm not comparing Russell Brand to Ted Bundy, because I know some people are going to get mad about that.
Yeah, but it's like it's the absurdity, isn't it? That like even Ted Bundy had someone who could speak well of him. You know?
Exactly. So yeah, there are going to be people who speak well of Russell Brand. Absolutely, there will be. But the key is that these 5 women who have come forward, and the one I think the most damning is the one who on that day went to a rape crisis center and she had the test done, and then she decided, I don't want to fuck my whole family up and my life up over this. So she worked to get past it, or to move forward.
Because she was actually discouraged from going forward with it, wasn't she? And there was there was at least a couple of them, I think. Because the thing, when a celebrity's involved, particularly in the United States, people are heavily discouraged by law enforcement and by people around them and their handlers and all that from making a case out of it, because it's a celebrity. They are actively protected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was rumor and conjecture, but when Priscilla Presley died a year, 2 years ago, there was the conspiracy theory was that she was silenced by the Scientology because she was going to speak out against Danny Masterson at the time. She was going to say that the church was trying to convince her to talk to his accusers and try to get them to recount their testimony. So there's lots of people who are invested in keeping famous people famous.
Yeah.
And they're going to, because it's not just that Russell Brand is the one who's making this money, you're trying to protect him. He's got agents and managers and producers and TV shows. There's a ton of people who are relying on him being the face of whatever there is they're doing that need him to make them profitable.
And I think this is a good time to talk about idiosyncrasy credits. Basically, we talk about it in psychology, usually to do with leadership, but it can be applied here too. So basically, in order to exist within society and do what you're doing, you have to conform with it, right? But then depending on your perceived value to that society, so if we have Russell Brand, it's based on how much money he's making the BBC, how much money he's making Channel 4, and it's like the amount of content you can put out, how many people are watching it, etc. So then, so as he's conforming with all of that and getting all this money in and resources for them, he's a very profitable man. It means that he can build up a lot of idiosyncrasy credits. So idiosyncrasy would be him acting counter to society's values or the values of the group, and it's called credits because he can spend them. So it's kind of like, yeah, well, he makes us loads of money, but he's also having a relationship with a 16-year-old girl that he picks up from school, and he's like 30. And okay, but we could turn a blind eye to that because he makes us this amount of money. And then it means then that you can get away with doing really bad stuff by any metric. Like, if these allegations are all true, if court finds it true, and they convict him on it, then some really bad shit. And so these people can get away with really awful stuff because of how much money people are making off of them.
And how much time has elapsed. In a couple of years, nobody will. I mean, look at Roman Polanski, right? He was completely blacklisted back in the day because of an inappropriate relationship with, I think, a 13-year-old. But now he's winning awards and making movies, and he's back. And so it's, as soon as there's distance to it, people tend to sweep it under the rug and forget about it.
And it's like, one of the things that people are coming out with in Russell's defense is, innocent until proven guilty. And it's like, that doesn't apply in society. First of all, it's presumed innocent until proven guilty, but by the courts, by your government, so they can't prejudice you, right? we're members of the public. We can think whatever the fuck we want. And I would not trust anybody alone with Russell Brand.
It was Daniel Sloss at the end, whom I love.
Yeah.
When he had talked about how the women comedians have this list of don't work with these people, work with these people, and that he for years had been on that don't work with Russell Brand list. It's allowing it to continue. Like that one woman in the interview had said he was a heroin addict on MTV, then he was a sex addict on E4 and a sex addict over here. They just kept moving him around and making him somebody else's problem and cash cow.
Yeah, sideways promotion. And he it's not normal to put a clause in your contract that says you can't have sex with people that are associated with the production.
That was disputed. That was under dispute. So I don't know. That's in the documentary. It said that either his manager or he had said no, that wasn't in there. But they had maybe I had just kind of glossed over that.
But a court,
but I know there was some contention.
Like this is the thing: is like a court can find out some of these things. Like there's certain things a documentary team can't find out, and there's certain things that we as the public won't know. So this is like when I talk about evidence, I think there's enough evidence to take it to court. Like this needs to be investigated.
Absolutely.
And as a member of the public, and with my experience working with sex offenders, I don't fucking trust him. I never have done. For all the reasons that we're seeing now, I've never liked him. I used to watch his content on YouTube because he was the only person saying a bunch of stuff. But then he went really crazy tinfoil hat brigade after about 9 months of that. And then I just turned off completely to him. I was like, oh no, he is the Russell Brand that we all know and hate. He hasn't changed a bit. So yeah. But I just wouldn't, even as a guy, I wouldn't want to be alone with him. I mean, he's got a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Was he really?
Yeah, it makes him a very dangerous person. A purple belt, like, is pretty high up. And he's very competent at it. And he's a lot stronger than he looks. So, yeah.
I'm curious to see how this all plays out. It felt like it was everywhere for a very short amount of time, and now it's nowhere.
Yeah,
it already feels like everyone stopped talking about it. Where there are 5 young women who they need to have their stories heard, they need to have their day in court.
Yeah, and I think what I found quite interesting with it is, and journalists have been wondering about this too, is how like TikTok seemed to have been manipulating their algorithm with the Russell Brand stuff. So if you were reasonable about it, say a certain person we know like me, and you're a man, and if you were supporting Russell Brand, your content got suppressed. If you're a woman behaving, for want of a better term, hysterically or emotionally against Russell Brand, your content got boosted. And if you're a man being hysterical or emotional for Russell Brand, your content got boosted. And so they encouraged the gender war.
So showing off his fans and his detractors as being rabid.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And it was quite hard, like, to actually find decent content that, and I think the only reason why I got to see some good content about it is because I was already mutuals with those feminists and stuff. So I got to see a better perspective of it.
It's interesting, and it comes back to every time somebody gets accused of something, there's always these people who are just so frothing at the mouth defending them with no actual evidence other than they say things that I like what they say. And I think with Russell Brand, he made all of those wickedly inappropriate jokes that people laughed at. So it opened up that door for those guys, young men watching, to be like, oh, that's okay, that's how you get women, and that's how you speak to women. Like, it gave that permission to be able to do so, even when people were visibly uncomfortable. Like that woman who he said he wanted to have a go at her daughters. You could tell she wasn't along for the joke. And they panned to the audience, and there were 3 guys in the audience who were leaning forward and kind of like laughing at the whole thing because how naughty that he would say that to somebody's mother. Yeah. It gave people permission to be naughty. So they like that. They like that about him, and they don't think that he'll do anything because, well, come on.
It's little Russ.
Yeah, he wouldn't really, but
he would.
He probably would, and he probably did.
Well, like when he rang up that bloke, and then with Jonathan Ross, him and Jonathan Ross were like he shagged his granddaughter or something. They left a phone message on this guy.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
He's no consequences. Until now, he's not had to deal with the consequences of his action. He fucked up really badly. They sent him off to rehab, and then when he comes out, he's got another job somewhere else. He fucks up really badly again. They send him off to rehab. He comes out. He's got a job somewhere else. He's never. Other people are scrambling to fix his messes. This is the first time he's got his own mess that he's not going to be able to get out of.
Yeah. Oh, hopefully. Yeah. And the other thing is like these people are like trying to say, oh, well, they're just coming from, and it's because he's trying to speak truth and all that stuff. And it's like, but that doesn't make the allegations false. It just means they're releasing it now. Like, both things can be true, guys.
Exactly. The timing may be suspect, although at the beginning of the documentary, they do say they've been investigating it for
like
a
12
year.
months. Yeah.
Yeah. So the timing may be suspect because if they've known about these allegations sooner, why wait until now? But that doesn't mean the allegations are any less true.
Well, he's been doing his content on YouTube since the pandemic, so since like 2020. So I personally think it fits in a timeline wise. Because they saw what Russell Brand was doing, because he's been doing this stuff since about 2014, 2016. He's been on he was more involved in mainstream media, talking about this stuff. Like, he's quite politically active in the UK anyway. And then come 2020, he starts his YouTube channel, I think, and then starts speaking more actively anti-establishment.
But these allegations, some of them go back to 2011, 2012. I think there was one back as 2006.
No, this is what I'm saying. Like it's, both things are true, right? Like, or could be true. Is that, yeah, he is a piece of shit and did all these horrible things. They're releasing it now. They've been investigating it for 12 months. And they're releasing it now because he's not under the protected dome of the protected people anymore.
I totally get that piece, but it's curious about the why now. If they'd known about these women for the past 15 years or 12 years, that they would choose now. Like, why weren't their voices going to be heard earlier? Like, were they saving? Did it just come forward that they were like, hey, we should dig into Russell Brand, and they found it now? Had they always known and they were
maybe not the documentary creators themselves, but people at the BBC and Channel 4 knew about Russell Brand and the allegations against him. I don't care what they fucking say, because the BBC covered up Jimmy Savile and they covered up Rolf Harris and said there was no allegations and all this stuff. So it's quite well known that our broadcasters cover up these sex offenders. And
the conversation just reminded me that there was a snippet of a conversation he had with Jimmy Savile where Jimmy Savile was like, bring me a woman.
Yeah, bring me an intern.
Yeah, an intern or assistant.
Yeah.
And they joked about it like it was nothing.
Yeah, so they kind of, so there's a few levels at work here. So one of them is that somebody, it looked like in the BBC, the controller of Radio 2 and Radio 6, she was shielding Russell Brand from consequences. And so there were some allegations of things that weren't being pushed forward. There's also this societal, part of society where it protects celebrities from allegations in general and discourages people coming forward. So that's another thing. The other stuff is, like Daniel Sloss was saying, is that everybody knows who the fuckers are. They know who they shouldn't work with, but they still keep getting work because of the whole idiosyncrasy credits thing. They're good money earners, right? And so the industry shields them. And then also in the case of something like Russell Brand, there's a lot of grooming happening. He grooms audiences. He grooms people that he works for. And then they don't take allegations seriously, or they don't push them forward. Like, oh, well, it doesn't sound like something Russell would do. That's exactly what groomers do. That's exactly what sex offenders do, is they make it look like they wouldn't fucking do it.
It's like every time they talk to the neighbors of somebody who did some seriously shady shit, the neighbors are always like, "He was such a quiet guy, such a nice couple." But yeah, of course.
It's a mask.
They've learned how to not arouse suspicion.
Yeah, and then so when people try to bring it out, there's always this resistance that stops them from doing it. And maybe there was some kind of, I don't know, aligning of the stars when, like, these people involved in this documentary had found out about the allegations and wanted to bring it forward, or maybe it was leaked from somebody who had something to do with Russell, something like that. And it's like, well, he's not under the protected dome anymore. He's not part of our bubble anymore. He's put that to one side. So now we can't make money off of him. and he's fucked us over, so let's come for him. So I think both things can be true. It just disturbs me that people would rather believe his story and think, well, these victims are just faking it, and they're just willing, like they won't even watch the documentary to find out what people are saying.
Yeah, it's less of a stretch for them to believe that this narcissistic personality who's this addictive narcissistic personality would do shady shit. That is harder for them to believe than these 5 women have been coerced or paid into destroying their fucking lives by coming out with these allegations. Yes, if you were anonymous, but there were others that weren't, that they think that would be more realistic. That they found 5 women who were willing to do this and say this going back a dozen years, because one of them went to a rape crisis center a dozen years ago. Exactly. That disconnect. But I mean, there's people who still believe the earth is flat and birds are real. So I don't put anything past anybody.
There is a weird culture at the moment that people get attached to these personalities, and then it's like they can't do anything wrong. They're our messiah. They're going to save us. You know, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden or fucking Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy or Justin Trudeau, whoever, Boris Johnson. Like, people attach themselves to the person, not what they're campaigning about or what they do. Like, judge someone by their fucking actions and behavior, not the propaganda they sell you.
It's like they have a hard time believing that you can have, that good people can do bad shit and bad people can do good shit, because everyone's a combination of everything. There's not one good person, one bad person. There's actions. And I think they have a hard time with that, because if somebody did something shady, because they've invested so much into it, they can't come to terms with that. It's like they have that guy who, he does a lot of TikToks where he talks to people about Trump, and he will say, like, here, if a candidate did these 5 things, would you vote for them? And they're like, absolutely not. They need to be in prison. And then he's like, Trump did that. Well, that's okay then. People forgive way too much shit, but they will be so quick. And I think it also feeds into the timing of this now. And maybe it's because I spend time on Reddit, which is a fucking cesspool, but like there are a whole bunch of men who, unless they see a woman being raped, will not believe that a woman has been assaulted. And these men live their day-to-day lives assuming that every woman they come in contact with is going to falsely accuse them of something. Like, we're at a place now where the mindset of some loud minority has been so fucked that they will, even if they had a video of Russell Brand doing that, they would still be like, no.
Video's faked, doctored.
Yeah. Videos, it's AI.
The in the UK, the false allegation thing is so extreme, right? Because people conflate a lot of the wrong things when it comes to false allegations, right? We get so few allegations of rape in the UK that a man is more likely to be raped by another man than he is to be the victim of a false allegation.
And I know you've told me that before, and I think that that would likely probably be the same in most places. But there are like a lot of men who, they're like asking for support. How do I started a new job. What do I do to avoid false allegations in the workplace? It's like, not every single woman is out to get you. But when men are so afraid of that, and that not all men, not all women, then it skews their perception of everything. Like, I don't think they'll ever believe a woman if they don't actually physically see it. And there was somebody who had posted on a subreddit asking the question, what evidence is enough for you? Like, when it comes out with this Russell Brand thing, there were text messages, there were conversations. Why isn't that enough? And a lot of men said, I didn't see it. If I don't see it, I don't believe it.
And then I bet some of those men are Christian too. And they remember about Doubting Thomas, that he didn't believe it unless he saw it. And now he's called Doubting Thomas. You know? I
didn't see Jeffrey Dahmer eat somebody, but we're pretty sure it happened.
And then,
I am curious to see how this all plays out and what the next steps are.
Yeah. But do you know about super injunctions? Okay, I think it's just a UK thing. So they cost like £200,000, right? And it's solely so that a very elite rich person can stop a specific person or even journalists from talking about an issue. and they can go to court and get it done. Yeah. And it's so bad that the papers can't even write that there's a super injunction in place. So they can't even acknowledge the super injunction exists. And
how is that even legal?
Yeah. Well, it's because like, and you'll find every rich person who's like, so Russell Brand's all like truth and justice and freedom and all that. They think he has a super injunction against somebody that's got allegations against him.
What happened to like freedom of press, freedom of information? How is that even legal?
That's how corrupt our country is now. Honestly, we're fucked over here.
I'm talking a lot of shit, but we may have it in Canada. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll have to Google it when we're done. But that's fucked up.
Yeah. There was a guy here. Oh God, I hate him. He's a political commentator, and he used to work for the BBC, and maybe still does. Oh, what's his name? He looks really weird. Anyway, absolute shit. He cheated on his wife, and then I think he got with and then the woman he cheated on her with, he got a super injunction against her to stop her talking to the papers about it and telling people what happened.
So if you have enough money, you can pretty much get away with anything.
Yeah, basically. Andrew Marr, that was his name.
At what point because I can't imagine they would allow you to use a super injunction to hide evidence of a crime. So at what point does that end?
I think it's kind of like, if there's like physical, tangible evidence, then that could be dealt with in the court and stuff. But I don't know enough about it to say at what point does a super injunction become invalid.
Okay.
But I think he can.
Well, then why did you bring it up, Chris? Jesus.
but it's scary that like it says to me that there's this. If it turns out to be true that he got the super injunction, this woman knows something about him that makes him want to spend £200,000 shutting her up.
And how many more women like her, not just against Russell Brand, but just like how many people are out there who actually know the things? I'm like, this is why it's going to sound terrible, but you almost like, no, I'm not going to say what I was going to say, but like there are a lot of people who have said they work in retirement facilities or old like hospice care, that there are a lot of older people suffering with dementia who make these deathbed or like these confessions of times that they've murdered people because the dementia isn't holding back. So there's been a lot of women who were like, yeah, my husband abused me for 30 years. So in 1987, I poisoned his meat and now he's dead. And these things come out like, imagine this world where in 30 years, all these people who have been silenced by super injunctions are going to be in a retirement facility. Be like, remember that time that you murdered that guy? Remember when we hit a body with what's his face?
Can you imagine getting to that age and not having to give a shit anymore and having these dark secrets locked inside?
But some of these a lot of these people they have dementia, so they're the filter that was keeping their tongue tied has all loosed. So now it's all coming out. And what do you do? I mean, are you going to put a 93-year-old who's like in hospice care or in prison? No, you're just like, oh, well.
Well, if it's in the UK, they probably would. I mean, there was that 89-year-old woman who had those 2 police officers come to her house over that offensive tweet.
That's right.
So in the UK, they'd lock them up.
That is right.
Do you know, talking of other people that have done shady shit, so you know Rolf Harris? Do you know him?
No.
All right, okay. So he was so when I said my joke earlier about Jimmy and Rolf and Russ, like they're probably just 3 random names. So Rolf Harris was a children's entertainer on like BBC and ITV and stuff. And he had all these shows where he would like, and he used to release music and things like kids songs and all that stuff. One of his songs was Jake the Peg with his extra leg, little yeah. I've heard something else referred to.
A lot like, wasn't Jimmy Savile about kind of the same?
Yeah. They were. Jimmy Savile wasn't really a kids entertainer in a way, but he was a talentless idiot. But he had a show called Jim Will Fix It when he was an old guy. It's just like Make-A-Wish. So like, and Jim will fix it for you. So Jim will fix this thing to happen for you. Except the side thing is that he's probably going to try and fuck you. So
So he was okay. So I haven't watched. I know there's a documentary about him, which I never watched. I thought he was a children's entertainer, so
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, he
it was
sort
the
of
whole.
is. Maybe
Okay,
Jimmy kind of is, because like he used to go, like he'd go to children's hospitals and shit like that, and he'd get the kids alone and grope them, and then let them carry on with their day. Yeah, or like
nice.
a kid's school would go and visit the BBC studios, and he'd grab a couple and stuff. Like, and people knew that, like people in the industry knew this was happening.
But they protect, like you said, idiosyncrasy points.
And you know when people are saying like, oh, he's innocent till proven guilty. Jimmy Savile never got convicted because he fucking died. And when they had the allegations against him, the police at the time said there wasn't enough evidence to take it to court, and he died before anything could be done. Which means all those people that say innocent till proven guilty, what do you think about Jimmy Savile then? Jimmy Savile, like we know he isn't innocent. Like without a doubt, he fucked children against their, like, you know, they can't consent. They're kids.
I just anybody who apologizes for that type of, even if it's not, just how quickly and vehemently people are there to defend when they don't know, but they assume like, yeah, Russell Brand is talking about shit about the media. The media doesn't like it, but people have been talking shit about the media since media has existed. They haven't launched this type of campaign against them.
Yeah, I'll address that before I go back to Rolf Harris, because like it's quite gross what he did. But anyway, yeah. So with this thing, with like the thing coming from, I think it's more likely that he's not under that protected dome anymore, and these people have uncovered it, and then now there's nobody there to stop them. Whereas before they would suppress it and stop it. And I don't think it's that these people are coming for him specifically. I think it's just a lack of protection.
Yeah. And even if, they're not coming for him specifically, they're going for, regardless of who the predator is, they're going after a predator.
Exactly. Yeah. The people doing the documentary are just coming after a predator. And the system that was protecting him before has no interest in protecting him now because he's not working for him anymore.
That system at some point has to also be called into account too. Yes. Because it's not just that they're protecting predators, but like we've even spoken about this before, that there are people who have died as a result of people not wanting to say no because they have these, accidental overdoses because 5 different doctors are giving all these people these medications. And even when they say, no, he can't have this or she can't have this, they're like, just give it to them. They're famous. You don't want to ruin your career as a doctor. So that system that is protecting these people and making them, some of them even sicker than they are, needs to have a comeuppance.
Yeah. And then like the Free Britney thing, like why did that have to be one or the other? Like they were like, oh, she shouldn't have her dad doing a conservatorship because like he abuses the money and abuses the trust. And it's like, okay, then we'll transfer the conservatorship to someone else because she's clearly not well. No, you have to get rid of it. # Free Britney.
I watched a documentary about her recently too, and she needs help.
Yeah, she really does. She got bipolar disorder.
But let's go back to Rolf.
Oh yeah, Rolf Harris. So he got put to prison for doing all the same shady shit that Jimmy Savile did. And I used to watch him as a kid on TV. It's just so weird to think. Anyway, he when he was in prison in 2014 or 15, he wrote a song about one of his victims, and that they kind of like it was just really unfair that they stood up to him, and it's just like, really awful and stuff. And they're like, this person's selfish and they're just coming after a celebrity just because they can. Yeah. And he sent it to somebody he thought was his friend, but obviously his mate had disowned him because of when they found out what happened. But his shocked friend sent it straight to the tabloids.
Shit.
Yeah, print this. Ross a cunt.
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems like...
Yeah.